I didn't get a chance to jump up in front when he was finishing, when we finished Sunday morning. But everybody remember? Okay. Corbin led that closing prayer and did it like he was fearless. And I just told him a moment ago, when I was his age, I couldn't have done that for anything in the world. So I'm really proud of him. He's going to be preaching before too long. So Well, we have been in the book of Hebrews for a long time, although a long time for us is not all that long sometimes as we go through a long series of material. And we've gone relatively fast, trying to make one point, that the writer of the book of Hebrews is talking about people giving up on their life with Christ. And as we started Hebrews chapter 12, we talked about how there's a great cloud of witnesses that are encouraging us. And we talked about how we ended a little bit with the lay aside the sin that might beset us. And so we learned a little bit like this, that sometimes we get worn out, we get weary in well-doing, we just get tired, and we revert back to where we were. And sometimes it's more than that. Sometimes it's we're attacked in some fashion by Satan and we're pulled back to the world we used to be in. Well, he tells us to keep our eyes fixed on Jesus. He said, look at what happened to him. He didn't give up, and we're thankful he didn't give up. But now we start another little section here that I want to talk about for a moment, and I just don't like it. I never have liked to try to talk about this particular part of this chapter 12 of the book of Hebrews. So I want to talk in the beginning about perspective. How important is perspective? How important is how you choose to look at things? Does it make a difference? I used to tell audiences in leadership circles, if the attitude with which you begin a project will have much to do with how you end that project, or whether you end it at all. The attitude with which you begin. That has a little bit to do with perspective. Now, I've also told you in days gone by that I have to really work on my attitude or my perspective. Everybody remember that? Some of you remember that? I have to really work on mine. Some people seem to be natural with a smile and with optimism. Vicky, you hardly ever see Vicky without a smile, without just something's going on, something's good. You know, and she's just kind of bouncing around like, she doesn't know any better. And I keep talking about Ben Gosen. Every time I see Ben Gosen, I don't know if the sky is falling or not, but he didn't act like it. He just naturally smiles and has this perspective. Susan's a lot like that. But I have to work on mine. You may remember I told you a story it happened about a year ago right now, that I was really spending some time working on myself in regard to attitude. So I called this lady who I got to know in Washington, D.C. at Georgetown University in a class with her. Didn't get to know her very well, but kept following what she was doing. Now, she is a big-time executive coach. She works with some of the highest level people in the federal government and highest level people in the military. And she's now moved to Florida, at least part-time. But I texted her and I said, I think I need some executive coaching. And my implication was I wanted it free. and because she charges a lot, actually. And so in the conversation, what I knew about Lori was this. And I don't know how old Lori is, probably in her 50s, I'm guessing. But I knew when I first met Lori that they kept talking about her cancer. And I knew at one point they talked about Lori's cancer being so bad that she was paralyzed for 18 months, couldn't move for 18 months. And in a text, she had told me that I've had a reoccurrence of problems after having been able to manage it for many years. So when I called her, I said, well, how has the reoccurrence of problems come about? She said, well, and she was reluctant to tell me, she said, a team of research doctors have looked into the vaccine of COVID that I took. And I should not have taken the COVID vaccine. It messed with all these things that were going on in my body, and it was not good for me. Now, Lori's still doing fine today. And I said, well, Lori, tell me about the paralysis. She told me about that. In the process, she told me my husband, to whom I'd been married for quite some time, walked away saying I didn't sign up for a cancer deal. And so she's going through all this, and right now she's having a problem. I said, well, Lori, how do you do this? How do you maintain this attitude that seems always like the one I described in Vicki and so forth? And she said, kind of like she was chastising me, and maybe she was. Don't you understand? Don't you understand? It's a choice that you make every day when you get up. Every day when you get up, you have to make a choice in how you're going to live and how you're going to look at things. And I get up every day and I choose how that day is going to be. If I didn't choose how it was going to be, I would be a total mess. And so she taught me again this idea of you kind of got to make up your mind how you look at things. Because if I choose to look at things in a negative or whining, complaining sense, will I find plenty in every given day about which to whine and complain? Yes, every single solitary day. Well, I think that's what he's about to start talking about. I think it has something to do with perspective. And so he starts talking about this one word, hardship. Hardship. It's down in verse 7, I think. I really can't see it, but I think it's verse 7. I'm finding I have to wear reading glasses more often. No, I'm not going to take them. But yep, it's 7. We're close. But what is hardship? What is hardship?
It's different for everybody.
All right, it's different for everybody. And could it?
Struggling with a specific situation.
Struggling with some kind of specific situation that feels like it's an enemy. And so Karen could tell us what hardship looks like from her perspective right now in regard to a blood disorder. Jackie could tell us what hardship feels like to him in regard to eyesight problems and now another potential health problem. Ronnie could tell us what hardship looks like based on a wife that struggled with the cancer deal and now him dealing with a particular issue. Is there not one of us in this group that is exempt from the word hardship? Can the Livelies talk to us about hardship? And Joyce with a broken ankle after being sick for a long time and finally getting back to where she looked like she was just doing great and had all this vitality, and then that. And you think Louise could talk to us about hardship? And every one of these hardships is different. And yet to each one of us, it's a hardship. So how do you deal with all that? I tell you, I don't like it. I'm going to tell you, I don't like any kind of hardship. But I want you to watch what it says here. Endure hardship as discipline. Well, I don't even like that statement because I'm not too keen on discipline. Are you? I mean, I can remember my dad disciplining me, and now this is back in the old days, and I said at his funeral, I never saw my dad one time in all my life raise his voice in anger. Not one single time in all my life. But that doesn't mean he didn't bend my brother Nick and I over the bed and say, drop your pants fairly often and take a belt to us. And it doesn't mean he didn't say, if you come home with red underwear one more time, you're going to get it again. And I would come home with red underwear. Because I'd go to that crazy creek down there close to our house. And a group of guys and I would play King on the Mountain. And what you do is you crawl up the top of the slope and you push each other in the water. You try to stay king on the mountain. I came home with red underwear. And so I got the belt. You know, that was discipline. Anybody here remember a principal in this town named Alan Zisman? You know, that gentleman could swing a paddle like nobody else could swing a paddle. And so when you got in trouble, Mr. Zisman, he's dead now, but I really thought the world of him. He would never, ever, ever use the board on you at the moment you made the mistake. That wasn't his way. You would go in his office. He would talk to you about it. He would smile. Even when he was angry, he'd smile. If you happened to crack a smile, he would say, "You think this is funny?" And he'll say, "I'll be calling you sometime." So you wait till the intercom comes on. It may be 3 weeks later. Will you send Ken Jones to the office? Grab your ankles, Ken. Always 3 licks. You always went to the gymnasium to see if there's anything left back there because you certainly couldn't feel it. It was discipline. I'm not keen on discipline. And yet, there is something in the scriptures, not only in this passage, but in another related passage in Romans that says that when we go through this thing of discipline, it makes us what? What's it intended to do? It's supposed to make me stronger. It's supposed to make me better. So why in the world would my dad bust me like that? He's intending for that to make me realize there are consequences for disobeying what he said and not doing what he said. What I realized later was Mom and Dad couldn't afford to keep buying underwear. That's as simple as that, you know. But there was a reason for it. And Mr. Zisman wasn't doing what he did to me just to have a good time. And by the way, Donnie, you're to kind of blame here too. Those times that Donnie stopped me were supposed to be for my what? For my good. So he could say to me, "Son, if you keep driving like this, you're going to end up over the ditch or you're going to end up like this. So I'm going to give you this little piece of paper to help encourage you not to do this anymore." And, you know, and now he's coming to church with us. How can a guy like that let him in church? You know? So that discipline is intended to make us better. That's the whole deal. It's intended to make us better. So now the writer of the book of Hebrews is saying to all of us, you know what? I know that life is really hard. And I know you get tired and you get weary. And you just say, what's the use? And you want to give up. Or I know you get yourself involved in some kind of entanglement of sin and you want to quit. It drags you back. And I know there are problems that come and you say, why should I have this kind of problem? It doesn't seem fair. And not very long ago in a lesson, we kind of started that lesson somewhere early in it saying, have you heard the statement that life is not fair? And the truth of the matter is, it all feels like that to us, or often feels like that to us. We all have an experience. And so he says here, I want you to change your perspective on hardship. I want you to change how you look at hardship. And I want you to endure it as discipline, as though you're getting helped through something. So, Suze and Greg and Zonell have their mother in a nursing home. Do you think that's easy? Do you think it's easy for her? And I had my mother there for a while, and then I had my dad there for a while, and thankfully they didn't have to stay very long. Now it may sound strange to you, but thankfully they didn't have to stay very long before they passed from this life. But it was hardship. And I began to say things like this to myself and pray about this like this myself. And then Susan and I would talk about it. Maybe there's something in all this that I don't like that I'm supposed to be learning. And I began to ask, help me see what you want me to learn from this experience that I don't like. Am I making sense to anybody? So that hardship begins to look like discipline because he says, God is treating you as children. God is treating you as children. Now, the assumption of how I treat my child is that I what my child? I love my child. Now, I'm going to tell you, there are some children that can't say that. Do you know that? And there are some adults who can look back their childhood and say, my mom and dad did not treat me in love. There are some children that are flat out abused. So I know that. But in general, the general rule is that parents love their children. And whatever they do for the good of their children. Does that make sense? So my basic definition of leadership comes from the book of Esther. Everybody remember that? I met with a guy today who I didn't know at a place off campus, and he wanted to tell me a bunch of stories from the past. He's retired, and he said, but I'm listening to your stuff, I'm reading your stuff that was published by the Church in Norman on leadership, and I've got the first principle down. Leaders work for their good and speak for their welfare. As a parent toward your child, what's my job? Always to work for their good and speak for their welfare ahead of my own, regardless of age. And that's how I think. I promise you that's how I think. Now, why would I think like that? Because I what? I love them. That's the basic underlying assumption. Don't you understand? He says, God is treating you as a son. He's showing his love for you. If you will view hardship in the right way, it's as though God is going to take you and grow you up through this hardship. He's going to make you better. He's going to make you stronger. And you're going to be able to stand the test the next time another hardship comes. Because if you think this is the last hardship you're ever going to have, guess what? You're wrong. That's right. Because they just keep coming. For what son is not disciplined by his father? If you're not disciplined, and everyone undergoes discipline, he says, then you're illegitimate children, and you're not true sons. In other words, he's operating on the assumption, the writer, whoever the writer is operating on the assumption that if your parent never disciplined you, they didn't care a thing about you. I need to send this video to my brother Steve. Because Nick and I got busted regularly, and Steve never got a spanking in his life. But look at the difference in us, you know. So I don't know how Mom and Dad really felt about Steve. I mean, I'm not sure he should have been here. You know, so, but if he's here Sunday, y'all don't need to tell him any of this, okay? The assumption is that parents love their children. And if you're not disciplined by your parents, maybe they don't care. How much more should we submit to the Father of our spirits and live? Our fathers here disciplined us for a little while, as they thought best. But God disciplines us for our good, that we may share in his holiness. I know it doesn't seem pleasant, he'll say at this present time, but it will produce a harvest of righteousness and peace for those who have been trained by it. And the only way I get trained by it is I look at it with the right perspective. Does that make sense to you? I just have to look at it with the right perspective. So if I'm going to moan and groan and wilt and fuss and complain and tell all of you how bad life is treating me every time I have a problem, first of all, you don't want to be around me. You will turn and walk the other way when I start coming. I know that because I've done that with certain people over the years. None of you, but over the years I've said, oh, got to go the other direction, you know, which is bad on me. I know. But you see what I'm talking about. You don't like to be around those kind of people. And those kind of people shine no good light on the world. It's when we endure hardship with the right perspective and we grow from it, that we're able to shine this light, get stronger and stronger, and people see and people say, wow, living with God is different and it must be better. Everybody kind of got that? So maybe you're like me and you have to work really hard on your attitude. I just have to.
James says, count it all joy.
Yeah, the scripture says, count it all joy. And sometimes you don't feel like that, but it's perspective. It's how you look at it.